Welcome to another episode of From a People Perspective, a show hosted by Martin Hauck. Today, we're joined by Lorena Scott, a seasoned people leader who moved from investment banking and private equity into building and scaling people and culture inside high-growth companies. Over the years, Lorena has helped organizations grow globally, navigate rapid change, and build environments where people can do the best work of their careers. In this conversation, she shares lessons from scaling teams, leading through growth, and what it really takes to preserve culture as organizations evolve. In this episode, we explore how non-linear career paths can shape stronger and more empathetic people leaders. We discuss why slowing down hiring and embedding deeply in the business helps protect culture during periods of growth. And we look at how focusing on impact in the present can lead to long-term career success. This podcast is brought to you by the People Group. We're on a mission to economically empower people leaders. By joining our community, you'll gain access to career opportunities, a network of over 6,000 modern people leaders, and exclusive tools and resources. Learn more at thepeoplegroup.com.
Lorena.
Yes. Can I
Thanks
call
for
you
doing
Marty?
the podcast. Yeah, you can call me Marty. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, I've had a crisis of my name ever since I've met Lorena because she wants to call me Marty, and now other people call me Marty. And this isn't just Lorena, but I want to switch. But if I put Marty on my LinkedIn and then everything else, like how many things do I have to change?
You don't have to change. I just, it's a sign of care for me was for you to have a nickname.
This is true.
So, and it's stuck.
It did stick, and it caught on like wildfire because so many more people call me Marty because of you, which I appreciate. So thank you. But today is not about me. Today is about you, Lorena Scott, 4X Chief People Officer, who started in a completely different space than most Chief People Officers do. And another fun fact, Lorena and I worked together. She was kind enough to give me the opportunity to work with her, and it was absolutely amazing. And so I've been wanting to do this podcast for quite some time. Finally got on your calendar, and now we're here. Now we're here to talk about your road to becoming a VP and CPO head of people. Do you know how you got there?
No, I mean, that's a terrible answer. But I would say that if you had asked 17-year-old Lorena when she was leaving high school to go to university, that I would be in these roles or have these opportunities, I would have said you were crazy. Because I did go to study entrepreneurship and finance and economics. And so this feels like a very different, in some ways, a very different world. But I do think that I was super lucky. Like luck always plays a part. I had a lot of folks that would take bets on me and give me these things that I had no business probably owning, leading, doing. And I was always super curious. And so I think the result is I've had a really winding career that has led me to do the thing I really love, which is helping people do the best work of their careers.
And that's a pretty big mission. And so I kind of want to go back to that because the thing that for most of the people listening, getting to where you are is out of reach conceptually, right? And I think just for anyone starting out in their career or in the middle of their career, especially now in the middle of their career when, they had a good track and now the economy's doing all this funny stuff, the world's doing all this funny stuff. And now it feels like getting to where you are and other amazing people leaders are in terms of their career just feels even harder to reach just because there's so many more challenges, right? And so I think, and I do want to get to that part of the story, but would love to just kind of like, to your point, right? If you asked Lorena in high school what she wanted to do, you wouldn't have necessarily given this answer or come down this path. So maybe take us back to that and then we can kind of see how this all makes sense.
Like what I wanted to do, what 17-year-old me wanted to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really inspired by my dad, and he's still a huge, as you know, I mean, I talk about him all the time. He's a big source of my inspiration in terms of like how I treat people, like the career choices I've had. And he was very much an entrepreneur, and he like he was super creative and courageous and like just did things because he was curious and wanted to make the world better. Like that's my dad in a nutshell. And so I just wanted to be him. And so I saw business and studying like entrepreneurship, being really analytical and strong in the kind of finance piece of like running a business would lead me to be a version of my father. And he was very supportive of that, like just really emphasized education. I grew up in, finished high school in Bogota, and my parents sent me to the US. I went to Boston for undergrad and grad school. And that was really like them giving me this opportunity. And I knew that I needed to make the most of it because it was a big deal to be able to do that for me and for my brother and my sister. So anyway, that's probably a long way to say. I just want to be
No.
my dad. They have like, I'm old to be like Mike. I wanted to be like Santi. I wanted to be like my dad.
Is there a memory that stands out for you when it clicked that you're like, I want to be like, I'm sure there's a ton, but is there one in particular that really gave you an appetite for entrepreneurship and business?
Yes. And, I mentioned my dad was sort of a business mind all of his career. But it was actually when he was most challenged and in spite of that. So my father had a stroke when I was 17 years old. And it affected his ability to read, do math, speak, write. And so essentially he was forced to retire from a lifelong career as a petroleum engineering, oil executive. And most people would kind of stop in that moment and say, okay, I'm done. Like I've had this experience and I can't really operate in the way I used to. Instead, my dad worked his butt off to like relearn 2 languages, English and Spanish, and figure out a way to reinvent himself through being an entrepreneur in order to still be curious and like be fulfilled. And also he had responsibilities for his children. We were still, needing his support financially. And so I think it was that moment of like his resilience and just being he never gave up, and he saw building his own things as a mechanism to still continue to like learn, grow, and support his family.
That's awesome. No, like it's.
You should interview my dad.
maybe I will. It's really inspiring too, like just to hear through, like when you're 17 and your dad goes through that, and then there's just like this. Well, as a parent now, like I'm kind of getting emotional about it, but like going through anything, and there's this like well of strength you have for your kids, where it's like you'll go the extra mile, and beyond the extra mile to do stuff for your kids. And it's just like a really cool side effect of being a parent. It's not easy, that's for sure, but it's a cool side effect. And it's cool that it had that impact on you, and only hope that I can have that impact on my girls growing up in some way, shape, or form. So that strength and that kind of like resilience leads you into, you're not like, okay, cool, I'm going to be an HR person now. Just from that moment, you go to Boston, you go to school. And then what's your first gig? Like your first meaningful, actually, no, what's your first gig that's not like I delivered papers in Bogota or whatever. Like what's your first
Like
paying job?
First job,
Like
or my first
first
job at
paycheck.
university?
First paycheck.
My first paycheck. I worked, I spent summers with my aunt and uncle in Connecticut. You probably know this. And they lived on the water. And so there was a place called She Sells Sandwiches. So
I don't know this.
And I was terrible at like actually making sandwiches. And so they put me behind the register. I was great at taking money and counting bills and all of that. So I think very, very on brand for me. So I worked the register at She Sells Sandwiches. And that was my first paycheck.
Nice.
And then my first job was as a banker. I was an investment banker on Wall Street.
Yeah, that's not a story many folks in Canada can say as well. And I think that kind of gives you a massive edge when it comes to like the not only being a people leader, an executive, but also just in general, right? I'd be curious to know. We're skipping over the middle part, but like that there is something to be said for life in New York and your experience in roles in New York and how that translates to your career. So I'd be curious to get a sense of how you feel that's impacted you.
I mean, it was amazing, right? I learned a ton. I mean, I took the investment banking job coming out of school because I didn't have my like idea. I didn't know what I wanted to start, and like even though I in my heart I was like someday I'll be an entrepreneur. I didn't know what I was going to build or do, and so I was like I need to go to boot camp, and like the finance boot camp is being a banker, an analyst, and helping companies go public, helping them acquire other businesses, and learning how to live, breathe, and excel, and understanding like the economics of a business, understanding how to raise capital. It's also like a great training ground on communication, right? So you're at a very junior level, engaging and supporting CEOs, CFOs, like the executive team of these companies that you're advising, and so it was great. And I made tremendous friendships. I'm going back to New York next week for work. And I'm going to see a bunch of people that were in my analyst class. And like I said, I'm pretty old. Like I was an analyst a long time ago. And so I learned a ton and I met really great people. And maybe I'm skipping ahead into some of your questions, but like for me,
No.
I had a boss who forced the analyst to speak first. Right. Like the analyst in a bank is like the most junior person. They're the fresh grads. We're the ones that work the 100-hour weeks and like do, everything and anything. Some glory work and some very unglorified work. And his name is Jeff Sine. And he said, analysts speak first. We had to have an opinion. We were not just sort of like punching things in and out. He was asking us to have a perspective and to be able to speak up. And it was pretty cool. For 21-year-old me.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have that kind of mentorship, and you can't find it anywhere. Did you know right away that this person was going to be like really meaningful in terms of a mentor and a leader, or is it more of like a retrospect thing?
It's more of a retrospect. I mean, he was the big boss. He ran like the what's called the TMT, Telecom Media and Technology practice. So no, I think in retrospect, I didn't even appreciate it at the time, right? I was like, oh, I want to speak. But now I think back and like how I operate as a leader and how I've seen other great leaders operate. And I appreciate it now.
Yeah, it kind of embedded itself.
Yeah.
So you go from there and then you spend a bit of time in telecom and media, it sounds like, or I'm skipping ahead. Tell me what's next.
So I did. I spent 3+ years in the tech practice. So I saw kind of the boom and bust. I went from like helping with IPOs to bankruptcies in the early 2000s. And then I moved to an investor role. So banking was great. I learned a lot. It's also on a personal level really tricky because there were many nights where I slept underneath my desk. And
Literally, like actually.
yeah. No, like I literally slept underneath my desk. And, I missed my sister's graduation from NYU. So I was in the same city and I missed it because I was working. And so I was like, this is not right for me longer term. And so I would sort of leverage the experience I had there to go, we call kind of sell side, meaning like more advisory work on the banking side to buy side. So working at an investment firm, acquiring businesses. And I had always had an interest in consumer branded companies or consumer businesses. And so I went to work for a private equity firm based out of Chicago that was focused on consumer, or mostly consumer, lower end of like the middle market. So think about like privately held companies that were anywhere from like 10 million to 20 million in revenue. I had the opportunity to kind of go learn, be curious about them, and then potentially buy them through this investment firm. So it was like a whole new world, but still very much within finance.
So that gives you a really good lens into like how businesses operate more tactically, because you're in that position, you're sort of popping the hood on the company and taking a look at every aspect of the business, as opposed to like, ooh, the presentation looks great, let's do it. Like there's a lot more work that goes into it.
Yeah, I also think it was the first, and this is more of a reflection versus knowing it in the moment, it was the first time I really began to appreciate what it means to have like a good leadership team and a good culture, right? Because there are companies that on paper, based on the financials and the markets that they served, and their growth rates and all of that, seemed like really great investments, but they had really bad leaders, and so ultimately the upside of those companies is capped, and or they're not able to kind of pivot and grow. And so I think it was my first real entrance into like understanding that the financials or the business metrics need to be there as well as the people part.
Yeah. Is the quick sidebar on that, like reflecting back on like literally sleeping at work, not like the like, okay, where was it, what kind of pillow did you have, not like that, but more in terms of
There's
like
no pillow.
there's, oh god, um is that was a behavior that was being modeled, that you're just like, I guess this is what I have to do, in the sense that like it was almost expected, and that's kind of like the hustle and level of dedication employees had at those types of firms back then? Or
I would say it was not a love of the work that people demonstrated that level of commitment. I mean, I think we were compensated in a way at that for my like for what I was, which was a fresh grad, in a way that was like, you're basically committed to this place. We're gonna pay
yeah,
you enough to be at our beck and call, is one component. And I think me personally, I have always, and maybe again, the influence of my dad, like my reputation is everything. And so I wasn't gonna just deliver like work. I was always gonna do my best to go above and beyond. And I think that at times required me to work around the clock. I don't know if that
yeah,
was the right call, candidly, because you always, you tend to hit a wall and the quality can degrade, whatnot. But I did want to be one of those that was known for like delivering great work. And
yeah.
there was enough work to do that could take all of, lots of time. Yeah. And but
When
I was at a stage where my friends were at work.
yeah,
I didn't have some of the awesome commitments that I have today, like a husband and 3 kids. So
yeah, when you don't necessarily have a reputation, when you do have the chance to build it for being like a hard worker, then invest in it, because it's going to pay off tenfold.
I wanted to have a good reputation, and also wanted to learn, right? I
Yeah.
think those things have always been important to me, like regardless of where I am in my career journey or how many years I've been doing the thing, I've always wanted to learn more.
And so you went from that space in the investments on the sell side, um, and how do you find yourself in people, or how do you find what's next in that step?
So there was a bunch of steps in between. I went to work for this private equity firm. By the way, best place to work I've ever been at. Best mentor, best boss. Thomas Darden is just an incredible human being, and he taught me everything I know about like building a great culture. And it happened in a private equity firm, which is sort of ironic because it's not what private equity firms are
That's
known
not
for.
what you expect from
No,
a
no.
PE
And I
firm.
remember,
No.
from there, that he and that entire team invested deeply in my career and in me as a human, led me to business school. Business school brought a couple things to me: great friendships, great like learning, a husband, and also an opportunity to go back to New York and invest on behalf of Time Warner. And so I went continued on the investing, but in a corporate environment. Incredible experience. And then I had my first child. And that's where I kind of shared that I didn't have my idea for 10 years almost, coming out of university. And then he was born and I got inspired. And so I started my own company. This time we had sort of had our first child, actually had our, by the time I got inspired with the business, I actually had 2 children. But I became an entrepreneur, and that was the pivot. So I started a company. It failed. And it took, 3 years of like really grinding, giving everything in my heart. I started it 6 weeks after my second son was born. And then when I shut it down, or at the process of winding it down, I was like, I need a job. I need to pay for all this debt that I've accumulated in having founded this business. And I was going to go back to investing, and my heart wasn't there. And my husband said, you're about to sign this, employment agreement, and you look sad. And he was like, don't do that. So I really, Sandy. So I'm really grateful for him to say, like, don't do something that is not going to bring you joy, and where you don't think that you're going to have like an incredible, like impactful experience. And so I walked into the offices of somebody I knew and said, I don't want to go back to finance. I don't want to start a company on my own. I want to go to a place that's established, has product market fit, and like take all the learnings of my failures and like help. And so that place, that person was Andy Yang. That place was 500px. And he put me in charge of finance, which I knew, customer support, which I didn't know, operations, legal, and people. He was like, and people. And I was like, but I don't know anything about people.
When does people come into play?
And that was it. And that totally changed my career. I started like, initially when I first took the job, I was like every day in the financial model. We were doing capital raise. I was like in the thing that I knew well. And then, so people was probably like 5% of my time. By the time I left 500px, I had like given the model to somebody else. And I spent 95% of my time thinking about people and our strategy and our culture and hiring and retention and all of that. So, I just loved it. And I didn't ever think I would, candidly. Like I understood formulas in Excel, but that's how it all happened. That was like the point.
That's the tipping point where you jump into the world of people. And I have a bunch of people-oriented questions, but before we dive into that, it's not a commercial, don't worry. Before we dive, I'm curious, for folks that don't have the chance, right? Because it's a unique opportunity to go to New York. It's a unique opportunity to start in, the finance world and the investment side. So there's a ton of stuff that you gained there. And skipping ahead, at the end of the day, it's like a huge asset as a people leader to understand the business side of the business as opposed to just the people side and the employment law side and all that stuff. From your, like, let's say you hire a senior intermediate HRBP on your team and they don't have that experience, but they're awesome. What are you recommending to them to get that experience that you got, in New York on the investment side so that they like level up quickly and kind of like see the business more holistically? Like what do you have people on your team, or what would you have people on your team do?
I don't think you need to have the Wall Street experience to understand like a business, right? Like that just happened to be my journey. Mm-hmm. I would say for the team members that I've had like the privilege of like bringing on and working with, they're all very curious. That is like a trait that is important in anyone that I partner with and work with. And so I encourage them to like embed themselves in the business, right? Like go deep in how the engineering org works and their sprint planning and their challenges and the product roadmap. Similarly, I have a people business partner that had been a people business partner, and then she went and like became a salesperson, right? And she was an account manager. She like understood like how that works. And I thought that was an amazing experience. And so when she joined to go back to kind of the people world, She's now like responsible for the go-to-market teams. And I was like, go and embed yourself and like really understand kind of what is the sales cycle, what is our, ICP, which is kind of our ideal candidate customer profile. Like go understand how Relay works. And I'm a big part of like driving and giving that clarity, and then go understand how your businesses that you are the partner and champion for work. And then we like ask questions. Like I always bring back the board docs. I go through our financials. I go through our economics. And so I want them to be as knowledgeable as I am, and ideally like more knowledgeable, because they're going to be more intimately embedded in the businesses that they support. But as like table stakes is like being curious, and the second piece is like go spend time with the business. Like it's you can't be a good partner if you don't understand the business, how it works, and the pain points of the people running, different parts of the business.
Okay, I got a two-parter for you.
Okay.
How do you test for curiosity when you're hiring people? And then how do you know that they're doing the right things in terms of like getting themselves up to speed? Because it should be kind of like a self-starter kind of thing. You shouldn't have to be urging someone to go embed themselves within the business. They should be sort of doing it themselves. So like, what are some signs that someone's on the right track, that they're doing the right things? So yeah.
So the first one around how I test, it's just questions in the interview process around like, tell me, like, when was the last time you picked up something new and what was it? Like, what do you want to get a little bit better on? Right? Like innate in like the continuous learning journey is curiosity. Sometimes you can kind of ask in a different way, as like, how do you think about feedback, and like how often do you get feedback? Like curious people are constantly asking for feedback.
Yeah.
So that's sort of one set of kind of questions that I like to ask to get to that. But I do think that curious people are also really great storytellers about like, hey, I just read this book, I just did this thing. They tend to be really courageous. Like, oh my gosh, I never did this before, and now I kind of picked it up. And separately around like, how do I know team members are doing that work on their own independently? I think it's based on the relationships that they're building. So, for example, if someone is really doing the work to get to know the business, then they've really bridged some strong relationships as a result. And so if I start to hear about, and I don't want to name names, so just like, person one is, I really value the opinion, or dropped in, and you start to hear their name more often with the teams that they support, and then they stop coming to me, because they know that this person actually has better answers because they're more embedded. And so it's like twofold. It's like, what are people saying, and also did they stop coming to me? And to me, that's like the ultimate stamp of approval, is like, we no longer need you, Lorena. You're no good to us because this person is far better. And I love that.
That's good. So back to your journey. This is fourth time in an executive position in people ops. You go from a few different companies. I don't know if there's any stories that stick out to you from some of your experiences, or if you wanted to touch on any of them. But I wanted to just get a sense of, the in-between phase before we focus on what you're up to now.
There's been a lot of in between. So I went from 500px, which I mentioned was sort of the turning point for me of working at a venture-backed, kind of started as a 50 person, got as big as 200, and then downsized, photographer marketplace, learned how to take photos and compose a photo, bought my first DSLR as a result. Awesome. It's like a very creative place. From there, kind of the challenge I faced was I was stretched pretty thin in terms of, owning everything from finance to people meant I didn't really go very deep in any of those areas. And there was a lot of context switching, and I decided that I really wanted to go deep in people, because it is where I was gravitating. And so I got the opportunity to join a startup in Toronto called Ritual. the time it was 40 folks, depending on how you like want to sum up the total size of the team. Kind of at our biggest, but we were 800. COVID hit, massive restructuring, let go, and I was part of that crazy scale up, and then opening up it from 5 markets to 55 markets.
It's like countries or like
No,
geos.
markets. It's like a city. So we, in the time that I was there, we went from sort of a few markets in the US and Toronto to Hong Kong opening, London, Berlin. So it just explosive growth, and then the unfortunate impact of COVID on a marketplace that served kind of lunch in downtown cores. It just it didn't thrive in COVID, obviously, and so a big reduction in force. Then went to I think on the heels of that experience, and really kind of went to a place called Caseware, which is where you and I got to work together, because I wanted to work at a place that was more established, less risk, profitable, and ran people there as well. What was really interesting about Caseware, as you know, is that it was global, and it was highly acquisitive. So it felt like it combined a desire to go outside of continue to work outside of North America, understand kind of the how you build a great culture when you have such a distributed workforce and with so many different cultures, and also that M&A component of what does it take to ingest a company, what are the mechanics of that, how do you evaluate from a people perspective. So it was really fun, and then I went to work for a company called Algolia, which was also quite global, but had been headquartered in France. And I had never done France as a people market. Learned a lot. And then I ended up at Relay. So, and I will say that, not that you're supposed to have favorites, but Relay has been kind of I'm having the time of my life. I feel so, so grateful. And it is also unexpected, by the way. When I was approached about this opportunity, I was like, no, thank you. And here I am.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the theme. The more I resist, the more joy I'll find.
There's you mentioned something in terms of M&As, and Caseware was my first experience of sort of the M&A culture, where actually no, I did a little bit. We had a little bit of that at CoinSquare, but not in the more not in the same way. And I guess the thought that I have, and this is something you have experience on the investment side, not something you were unfamiliar with. So for me, it was very completely new, and I didn't know what I was doing. And you were very gracious to give me the opportunity to kind of figure out where we're going to hire, engineers in the world, essentially, apart from, if we can't do it in Toronto in the US, where are we going to do it in the world? And that was a really awesome, interesting problem to solve. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to solve it. But you'd seen that done so many times with, Ritual opening up in so many markets and all the other places that you've spent time in. I guess this is my bias. And so is that M&As are hard in the sense that you've got company A and company B, and they have completely different cultures. One's bigger than the other. It's like a fish swallowing another fish. And then the people inside, I guess that's a really hard thing for anyone in people ops to go through. But if you're not necessarily an executive and you're sort of in the middle there, or for even just senior leader, but not at the executive table, what are some truths that you've found in all the times you've experienced that and seen that will help a person navigate that sort of experience?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things I'll clarify. Caseware was my first being on the operating side and acquiring a lot of businesses, because even with Ritual, for example, we didn't acquire businesses. We went to markets and we vetted ourselves and hired talent through Ritual. We didn't buy businesses for our expansion.
True.
So,
yeah.
And so that was a first around sort of literally being highly acquisitive. That was the primary way that Caseware was growing. And so it was not only important, it was mission critical to be able to acquire businesses as regularly as it has been over the last few years. And I would say that I don't think caseware is a great example per se. I think if you can be thoughtful about finding cultures that are very deeply aligned, then the integration and the success of the combined entity is much more likely, right? Otherwise, it might even be better to acquire the business, but allow them to operate independently, because
Right.
the combination of those folks doesn't lead to really a great work environment and therefore the ability to thrive. So on the assumption that the cultures are deeply aligned and one plus one is three, for being cheesy. Then I think it's and again, I don't want to be cheesy, but it's be curious, go to your counterpart in this other org, what has worked well, what have you what have you learned? There's, as humans, we have a ton of blind spots because we get into our habits. And I think the beauty of a different company or a different organization is different ways of working and learnings that you can kind of take without having had all those failures or having had all those moments. And so
Yeah.
that is my bias, has been my bias, to really understand the company, the people that you're acquiring, and to ask a lot of questions about what were the lessons they learned. And I think at different levels, you'll get different responses. But I remember for Caseware, the first company we bought was in Houston. I traveled there to meet the team and share the news. And I spent a full day just tell me about how you work and tell me about, what makes this place special. And I think those level of questions hopefully made, for a better experience for that group coming in. And also I learned a ton and took things back that we could ideally incorporate at the kind of corporate or global level.
Yeah. And so it sounds like when they were going through that, it wasn't just, okay, the heads of each business are meeting with each other, they shake hands. It was more intentional in the sense that you not only are connecting with the executives, but you're connecting with everyone at the organization, and sort of giving everyone a chance to meet the new partner, essentially meet the
So
family.
I would say for the time that I was there, that was my strategy. The decision to acquire a business was very much held at the executive level. So we didn't really involve other folks, but once you make the decision and you go through the diligence and you actually do the deal, I think going to those locations and building trust early on and getting to know the people, saying what you're really showing up versus words, it was important. At least it was important to me. I don't know the playbook after that, but it was important to me.
So you talked about how this is, you taught me an expression fills your cup. I love that expression. I use that all the time. And it sounds like Relay and what you're doing now with your team and what Relay is doing is really filling your cup. What stands out for you in terms of why is it that,
There's so many reasons. I think it always starts with the people, as trite as that may sound. And so I feel very fortunate to be working with an incredible team that I got to build and on both sides. I'm responsible for both the people as well as customer experience here at Relay. And so I've really helped put my thumbprint and finding these remarkable people and developing remarkable people and letting them be extraordinary every day. So I just I tried to recruit you. You said no to me, but I'll put that aside. I just feel really grateful to work with hardworking, humble, driven, passionate folks that make me better and challenge me to be better. I love that we're serving small businesses. I talked about my dad, he was an entrepreneur, my brother, an architect. I think of them in the product and the experience that we, how we show up for these SMBs. And so you know, I've been at places where I can't really connect to the mission, and that makes for a big difference in terms of the passion for the work. And this is not work for me. This is just like, this it does fill my cup every day. It's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but I find joy in what I do. And I think the third piece, honestly, is like the diversity of the role. So I think of myself as someone who cares a lot about experiences. And today, every day, I'm thinking about how we show up for our internal customers, our team, and the experience that we design for them from the moment, they're from a candidate to kind of their goodbye, right? And everything in between. And then I also think deeply about the experience of our customers, our small business owners in the US. And, many of them, like the big banks, don't care about. And like, how do we have a voice and a level of care and empathy that really sets us apart? And where are we in those moments that matter to them in their kind of journey, to help them, like, not just, survive, but thrive. Like that's a big, meaty mandate. And so I love that I'm learning and I'm doing and all that, me, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. And I mean, you're doing, you and everybody at Relay is doing important work. I'm biased as an entrepreneur myself, in the sense that, like, yeah, the big banks don't care about the small, onesie twosies. It's kind of shameful, to be honest with you, like, given where, even just with the talks that are going on right now, it's kind of shameful in the sense that, like, countries should support their entrepreneurs more, but instead, most of the times, there's just all these hurdles, and it's just like, even just the simplest things, like, I've got a limit on my bank account on how much I can e-transfer, like, partners and vendors, and it's just like, I don't have 45 minutes to spend on the phone to get a limit increased. And it's just simple things, like, it's thousands of those things every day. And as an entrepreneur, it's like, if it's not actually driving revenue and growth and awareness, then what's the point, right? You don't have time for it.
Yeah, I think that's the nugget for us, is that we know that as a business owner, you are stretched really thin. And so, like, this is not the thing that's going to help your business grow or help you pay your team, right? And so we want to make it easier.
I imagine by now you've got most of the foundational stuff sorted, right? You've been at Relay for a bit now, and you've got your team and
the dream team.
But what are you thinking about? Like, what are you working on now? Like, what's the problem you're trying to tackle now on the people side?
Scaling, right? I think that the practices that we've had from 0 to 100, as we go from really 200 to 500 team members and a much bigger revenue, like much bigger business from a revenue and a customer, as well as like a product portfolio perspective, like the complexity of Relay is really amplified since I joined. I was sort of kind of in the 50s, and we've 4x'd in size, and we're gonna, continue to grow at that pace. So it's like, how do you preserve the magic of Relay from a cultural perspective and the values as we continue to really add more people, talented people. And I sort of tackled that with Ritual, but I feel like the journey was unfinished. And so I'm excited to take the learnings from that experience, do things different, because there was, some wins and some not wins or some failures. And so, like, learn from those, do it differently. But it is to maintain the magic. And that's what people often say, is like, oh, once you get to like 500, it's not the same. I'm like, why does it have to be that way? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. Like, what needs to be true now, so that by the time we are that size, people can say Relay never lost its magic. It never lost its eye for talent. It never stopped investing in its people. It never stopped developing great, incredible folks to do great, the best work of their career. And I say that like every day, and I'm sure like people are annoyed by it, but it is like what drives me, and what, when I wake up, I'm like, okay, what are we going to do differently today to make sure that that's true?
What's the tangible way that, I imagine, there is an aspect of having to like have that drum beat of like, this is how we're thinking about this. We want, but how do you embed that within the culture? How do you empower your teams to think in the same way?
I think it's really important to hire people that align with that because it's hard work. Like the team that I'm a part of, like we all put in incredible amount of time, energy, and care to create that foundation to deliver the programs that should enable that. So I think if that isn't important to you, if this is just a job, we're not that place. I think where I want to do more to empower the team is like provide a lot of context work, collaborate on like roadmaps. I mean, I run the people team like a product org, right? We're experimenting, we're running in sprints. We have a roadmap that's broken down into quarters, and success is not like the project is done. It's metrics that we want to move. And I think that allows folks to feel very empowered to make trade-offs, to make different decisions. And like, if this isn't working, but this is the end goal, how do we pivot? So hopefully I'm creating a mechanism or infrastructure. I'm hiring people that operate in that way, that care about those things. And then I'm giving them the infrastructure to go and do that. We'll see.
Cool. I guess now, a few more questions, and thanks again for your time. This has been awesome. I think it's a really cool, like, peek behind the curtain in terms of like not only your career, but just like the diversity of experiences you can have leading up to this. So it's really, really cool. And I think a lot of times people think in very linear terms in terms of a career. Like, I did this, and 1+1 = 2, and that's it. It can never equal 3. In terms of like what you're focused on for the future, like that you've got this scaling part, what are you keeping an eye on in terms of just the people and culture side of things from like a future perspective? And I hate to bring it up, but it's something everybody's talking about and it's on everybody's minds. I'm curious to get your take on AI's impact to all of this, and what you're thinking, how you're thinking about it.
I mean, I'm laughing because you know me very well. And so, I'm not a technology first person. I mean, I even scrambled trying to figure out how to get onto this. But I think being resistant to something as powerful and as like AI, it would be silly. So I think for example, I use ChatGPT every day in my work, like full stop, right? And because one of the things that I want to get better at is communication, especially written communication. And so I'll literally have my, email that I want to send or Slack message. I'm like, write it better, but with my tone. Like that's my prompt. And so that's a silly example, but I think I am curious. I'm learning through like others that I know. I'm experimenting with AI. I think it can be incredibly powerful to become more efficient in the areas that aren't necessarily value add. Like I would rather write a thoughtful note more quickly and spend more time whiteboarding and iterating with my team, or even having a one-on-one to coach and support someone who needs that time. And so I think there's ways for all of us to leverage even like how we translate the data or how we communicate so that the human brain can go focus in more impactful areas. And I think that's as one example of like how I think it could be for good. But I am kind of a half glass full type person. So I see all the ways it can help people leaders and people team members be more efficient to focus in the areas where they can drive greater impact. I'm not necessarily thinking about like the negatives, and maybe I should, but that's just sort of where I'm at.
No, that's fair. One, I guess from a strategic perspective, are you more interested for your team to come up with their own solutions that involve AI, or are you are you leaning more towards the industry and the, the HR and recruitment and operations tools out there adopting AI, and then once they've figured out how to adopt it properly, that's when you'll push your teams to say, okay, this applicant tracking system is using AI in this way. Are you using it and encouraging them? Or it's sort of like more of a question, like, is it more of a wait and see and wait for, the service providers to figure it out? Or is there like an aspect or an initiative where you're saying, no, we're not going to wait for, the software that we use to figure out AI. We're going to seek it out ourselves in some way, shape, or form.
I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's an and, right?
Okay.
We're constantly evaluating our tech stack from a people perspective, like what are the right tools and systems that will help us do great work and more efficiently. And also, I think we have a really great team that's super curious. It's like exploring as well. So I almost feel like it's a combination. I don't subscribe to the wait and see piece. And so I'm hoping that we can carve out time. And this is something, we've discussed as a team, is like, can we have hackathons just within the people team and go and like play around with stuff and like, find solutions in our workflow, or on the talent acquisition side, there's like a bunch of things that they're thinking through. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's actually both.
Yeah, it's an and. Okay, cool.
I don't know if that makes it a non-answer to your question, but
it's very diplomatic. It makes sense. It's just like you're throwing your executive skills around. No, no, it's helpful. It's both. It is both, and people have answered that differently. Like some people are like, no, we're all in and we got to do it ourselves. And other people are like, we're gonna wait for other people. So I like the balanced approach to it, and that's kind of good.
Yeah, I want to say no, don't be curious.
Yeah.
I also think like people are quite time constrained as it is. So it's hard unless we're intentional to carve out that time.
That's fair. What's one thing that you've started believing was true in terms of people ops and leading people, that you believed early on in your career that's remained true? It's just like a solid bet and you've doubled down on it, and that you're still believed to this day?
To slow down in hiring. I think there is a lot of pressure from many of the orgs that I've been a part of to hire fast and fire fast. And there's one place that it was really high bar, epically slow. We'd miss milestones because we were always waiting for that exceptional person, and it was always worth the wait. And both from a business impact perspective, but like even more so from like a culture perspective. And so I look at the commitment that people need to make when they say yes to Relay or to any, or kind of in our, at our size and stage and like pace, and it's a big one. And so when somebody's making that level of commitment to you, you kind of like have a really high degree of confidence that you're going to be able to meet that level of commitment to them as well. And so, I will always take my time. And I know that there's a lot of pressure, whether it's the board, whether it's hiring managers, a CEO, a finance leader, whomever it is. But at the end of the day, if you're thoughtful about your hiring process and you believe in it, I think sticking to your guns and making sure you find the right people, even if it takes longer, always is better.
That's always cool. What's one thing you believed early on and you employed as a tactic early on, and then you're like, nope, this is the wrong way to do it? I don't believe, like, you believed it really strongly at first, but now you've changed, maybe a 180, maybe a 360 doesn't make sense, but you've done a 180 on it.
That's a great question. I have to there's so many things that I have, it's so many things. I don't know if this will be a a bad answer or not, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. I think early in my people journey, I was very much a micromanager. So maybe it's more of like a reflection on how I led, but like the best work has genuinely come out when I've sort of kind of set the context, but not necessarily been deeply embedded in like the actual body of work. And so it's more a reflection on like how I work and how I lead, in answering your question. That I think I always, because I started off my career very much as like not a people leader, right? I didn't manage anyone until I went to 500px. Truly, like my startup was very small, and my dad was one of my employees, so like not really a people leader. So I think like how I lead and how I enable great work to happen, my mindset was very much like I had to be very deeply ingrained in order for it to be excellent. And that's probably ego. I don't know what that is. That's just, and I definitely do not believe that anymore. I think there's different ways of like executing programs that has evolved, but that's quite tactical. So, but every day I'm like reevaluating my thinking and things.
How'd you change that behavior once you realized it wasn't serving you?
I had a really great coach. And that's one. I really believe in like coaching and it's like talent as a talent enablement practice. And I had someone give me advice on like write down like how you work as a manager today, and like it should be changing every 3 months if your business is scaling. And so like just that habit or that like administrative task of like, oh, I'm doing the same thing, I'm operating it the same way, that doesn't work. And I think the third one is like hard lessons, like people coming up to me and being like, I'm not learning, I'm not growing, or like you're not letting me do the thing I came to do, and this is uninspiring. It's like that's the biggest. Somebody telling you like you suck as a leader is the biggest way to start changing how you operate.
Yeah.
Because that's not how I want to show up for people. It's never been how I want to show up for people. So if people are kind enough to tell me and be courageous enough to tell me like, that wasn't great, the least I can do is like own it and do differently and do better.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for the folks listening that are inspired by your journey? And I'm sure they are.
I don't know. You asked me or said something like it's hard for somebody to see themselves like out this far. I never went out this far, right? I was very short-term focused. It was like, how do I get to New York and live in the city of magic? And so I got a job that let me do it. But then from that moment, it was always like, okay, how can I do great work at this place? And I think the result of and then maybe this is bad advice, but of like being focused in the present moment and having impact in the present led me to each of my different opportunities that got me to this place, right? I was never like, I'm going to be the CEO of a company. It was more of like, how can I be great right now and really learn? And that's what took me to the places I've been. So maybe it's like short term is okay. Like fill your cup every day, learn a lot, and drive towards like impact. And I think then you'll have a career of a lifetime wherever it takes you.
Amazing advice, Lorena. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. I learned some stories I didn't know. The sandwich, what was the name of the sandwich shop?
She sells sandwiches. Oh my
She
gosh.
sells. So were you like in the store?
Yeah, it was. Yes.
So would people walk in and be like, hey, she sells sandwiches? Did anybody do that?
It was owned by a woman, and she
Yeah.
was the she.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, like the first time my aunt and uncle came in, I like brought them to the food, which it was not like a table service. And then I like, it was a Philly cheesesteak, and I took some meat off of my aunt's sandwich to taste it. And so the customers were like, this woman, like, and she eats off of the customers. And my aunt was like, she's with us. I was not good at my job. That's why they put me on register. Couldn't make sandwiches.
Yeah.
Clearly couldn't, bus tables.
But But now you lead experience for both the customer and people. So kudos to you. You've come a long way. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Marty. It's good to see you. This is fun. Okay.
All right.
Am I supposed to just hit leave?
If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're not already a member of the community, please join us at thepeoplepeoplegroup.com.